everybody. As Cliff said, I'm Will Hamlin, and this is Josh Colson, and we're here today to talk about Moneyball for talent acquisition. Josh and I work on the Insights team at LinkedIn, and the charter of the Insights team is to harness the vast wealth of LinkedIn data and use it to make all of you, our customers, successful. And this is something that I'm personally very passionate about for two reasons. The first reason is that I honestly and truly believe that talent is the biggest long-term driver of a company's success. The second reason is that some things have changed since high school, but I'm a big nerd, and I just really like numbers. And the reason we talk about the story of Moneyball is because Moneyball is about how data transformed the game of baseball. And it's about the Oakland A's, who about 15 years ago were an under-resourced baseball team. They didn't have as much money to spend on baseball players. And so rather than using subjective methods to evaluate talent like scouting, they started to look at the data. And they were very successful. For years, they won the division, made it to the playoffs ahead of teams that had 5 times more money. And it transformed the game. And in 2003, Michael Lewis wrote a book called Moneyball about the Oakland A's. Very successful book, great book, one of my favorites. And then it was so successful that 2 years ago, they came out with a movie. And I got very excited when the movie came out because I saw that Brad Pitt was starring in it. And I thought, yes, Brad Pitt's playing a data analyst. Finally, I'm going to have my day in the sun. The world's sexiest man alive is a data analyst. And then I saw the movie, and he doesn't play a data analyst. He plays a sexy jock, ex-jock general manager, Billy Beane. So I thought, that's fine. I'm sure they got Ryan Gosling. I've been trying to copy his hair for years now. And they didn't get Ryan Gosling. They got this guy. So rather than being the Brad Pitt of LinkedIn, I'm the Jonah Hill of LinkedIn, which is really, really not what I was hoping for. But the key message of the movie and the book Moneyball is the Oakland A's were using data to evaluate talent. It's actually a very similar challenge to the one that faces you all every day. They're evaluating baseball players. You're trying to evaluate software engineers, financial analysts, salespeople. But it's the same basic challenge. And so the same way that 15 years ago, data transformed the game of baseball, we think it's time for data to transform talent acquisition. And it starts with a phrase that is very near and dear to my heart. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And the idea behind this phrase is that without quantitative, objective measures to evaluate programs, it's much harder. You can't do it. It's harder to dial up and dial down the success of an initiative. And if you think about your colleagues in different parts of the organization, for a while this has been easier. The CFO has income statements, balance sheets. Head of sales has the quarterly numbers to look at. In HR, this has been hard. So, quick poll. Raise your hand if you feel like your organization is good at using data to recruit. Okay. My eyesight's a little better than Tim's. So 15% of talent acquisition leaders in Australia believe that the organization is good at doing this. This is from a survey that we did, not from my eyesight of the room. And so if this makes you uncomfortable, you're actually in the majority. This is scary. This is change. But today we're going to talk a little bit about a few simple, actionable ways that you can start to change this. And where this starts is with the LinkedIn profile. So this is the profile of Sharon, head of recruitment and marketing at ANZ. And we think there's 3 things about profiles like Sharon's and all of yours that can start to change this. The first is the breadth of the data. 225 million members on the network, the largest professional database in history. However, the breadth wouldn't be useful without the depth. With profiles like Sharon's and all of yours, you can see where she works, where she used to work, what function she's in, where she lives, where she went to school, so that within that 225 million member set, you can slice and dice to very granular segments. And the third is that it's real time. We're adding more than 2 new members a second. New member, new member, new member, new member, every second. So it's constantly updating with the latest and greatest data about the professional profile. Breadth, depth, and real time. So today, we're going to talk about how you can use LinkedIn data to do 3 things. First, how you can plan by looking at talent pool analysis. Second is how you can prioritize engaged talent and measure your talent brand. And then third, some tips on how you can put it all into practice. So now I'll bring up Josh Colson to talk about how you can plan using talent pool analysis.
Thanks, Will. So let's start with how you can plan. Let's take ANZ. Now, we all know that ANZ are hiring professionals in the banking industry and the financial services industry in Australia. We also know, because you're all hiring in the same market, that Australia right now is an extremely competitive place to be hiring. It's an extremely competitive talent market. So the first way that you can use LinkedIn data is to set expectations with hiring managers. So if you've been given an incredibly hard-to-find candidate by your hiring manager, raise your hand. Anyone ever worked with a hiring manager who's asked you to find someone incredibly hard? Well, that's good. I guess we've got all the hiring managers over here somewhere. So in the American recruiting industry, they have a term that analogizes this. They call them a purple squirrel. Essentially, someone who is virtually impossible to find. They literally don't exist. So now we can use LinkedIn data to go back to the hiring manager and explain exactly how hard it's going to be for you to find that person, to find that purple squirrel. Or, on the other hand, how easy it's going to be. So the way we do that is with LinkedIn Recruiter. Now, I know most of you here today would be well aware of Recruiter and its ability and its access to the information on our 225 million members, the breadth and the depth that Will spoke of. So you may know that this also gives it it's one of the most powerful analytics tools available to you as recruiters. Now, I'm a data analyst at LinkedIn. One of the best places in the world to be a data analyst right now. What an amazing data asset. But nothing beats recruiters' ability to quickly measure the size of a talent pool. With such precision and granularity, it literally gives you the ability to create world-class talent analytics. So let's have a look at what this looks like. So let's go back to ANZ. Let's say that we've been asked for let's go a little bit sideways. Let's say we've been asked for an Australian, Mandarin-speaking lawyer, experience in international law, maybe something like over 6 years experience, and of course working in the financial services or banking industry. That sounds pretty tough. Now, traditionally, we may have gone back to the hiring manager and said, well, I don't know anyone that speaks Mandarin living in Australia and is a lawyer with all that experience, so it's going to be hard for me to find that person. But now we can go back to them and say exactly how many there are of those. Let's have a look at what it looks like. Here's Recruiter. So let's punch in a few keywords. Now on LinkedIn today, out of our 225 million members, there are 10,833 individuals who list international law experience and Mandarin. 10,833. That's not too bad. Let's cut it down. Australia, 507. To be honest, that's okay. That's pretty good. Then when we get a bit more granular, if we start to look at industry, we cut it down again. When we start to look at the experience level they're looking for, we're getting down to something that is much more difficult. And you can imagine if we went down with more specific, if we were more specific here, we virtually would be finding that perfect purple squirrel. They may not even exist. So what we can do with a recruiter is start to talk to that hiring manager, set expectations, and work with them to expand the criteria so that you are finding recruiting efficient. Or you can set expectations and say, that's fine, you want that person, it's going to take me some time. But here's what a talent pool looks like. This is exactly how many people on LinkedIn mention these skills. So that's a really tactical way of using Recruiter. using LinkedIn data. But recently, we've been working with our largest customers to do this on a more strategic level. So not only can we use LinkedIn data to look at the supply side of the equation with talent, we can also start to look at the demand side. How do we do this? Well, we've got all your activity. We know of you, all of our recruiters, all of you out there, and all of your teams. We look at who you're looking for, who you're searching for, who you're contacting. We can start to aggregate this information and start to make some real conclusions about the demand for talent. So we do this to help our customers identify markets for talent. We can help them identify where they should be looking for talent. And exactly like you can use Recruiter to set expectations with hiring managers, we've been using LinkedIn data to set expectations with our strategic customers about their recruitment strategies, about their expansion efforts, about strategic initiatives, etc. Let's have a look at what this looks like. Let's go back to ANZ again. Let's say we're looking for, let's go a little bit broader. Let's say we're looking for lawyers in Perth. Now, anyone that's been hiring in Perth will know that it's incredibly tough to hire anyone in Perth right now, as the demand is incredible. Let's compare that to Sydney. It's not actually that much less demand. I know, of course, I'm sure a lot of you are hiring in Sydney, and you'll know that. But the supply is more than double. So where else can we look? Let's look at Melbourne. Supply, less than Sydney, but way more than Perth. We can see that demand is much softer for lawyers. So we can use this information to really drive our strategic customers and inform them about where they're hiring and help them to identify markets for talent. Now, the other thing we've been doing recently is having a look at, we've been asking our members in surveys about what they're looking for when they're out looking for a job. So obviously, different professionals want different things. Recruiters and talent acquisition leaders want slightly different from engineers. But how do we measure that? So we've been asking them, what makes most sense? So different professionals obviously want, some want compensation more than, say, challenging work or job security. So we're now able to measure this. So with that supply and demand side analysis, that talent pool analysis, along with our survey results, we've been combining this into what we call our talent pool analysis. And we've been producing talent pool reports internationally for a good 6 months or so. But now I'm pretty proud, I'm very proud, and pretty excited to be announcing that we've done this for Australia. So we now have talent pool reports which will be sitting out the back in the next break, which you'll be able to grab, covering off 5 different segments of the Australian market. First of all, software engineers, financial services professionals, mining and energy engineers, student and recent graduates, and a first for LinkedIn, one that I'm particularly proud about, is looking at women in leadership using a talent pool analysis. So anyone hiring in these pools right now? Yeah? Great, excellent. Have a look at those out the back. They're also online right now on lnkd.in/plan. So you can use LinkedIn data to plan by, first of all, setting expectations with hiring managers at the tactical level. And at the strategic level, we can start to use it to identify markets for targeting talent. So let's talk about prioritizing. Now, once you've identified that talent, once you've identified the size of the talent pool, how do we then look at whether or not that talent is really going to be engaged with you? How do we measure whether or not they're interested in you? Let me illustrate. Say we're looking for software engineers. Now, I don't want to make broad assumptions, but I'm guessing a lot of software engineers look like this guy. Obviously incredibly intelligent, but his enthusiasm, his excitement doesn't look particularly high. And if you're contacting him, if you're looking for software engineers, and you contact this guy, he may not get back to you, ever. What we're looking for is guys that look like this. We want uber excited, super enthusiastic, and despite his bow tie and suspenders, he's going to be jumping out of his seat when you contact him. But the important thing is, how do we measure that? How do we measure that engagement or that excitement with you as an employer? Let's take Oricon. Let me illustrate this. Now, we heard a lot about Oricon today, and we also heard about their TBI story. So I'm going to go through that. Now, here's Liam. Liam, are you here today? Can't see a hand. Yes, maybe? So Liam and his colleagues have over 130,000 members looking at their profiles every year. We talked earlier and we saw how SAP and Autodesk are actually using their employees as brand ambassadors. So one of the most powerful ways that Oricon is doing this is that they've turned Liam and all his colleagues into brand ambassadors. 130,000 members are looking at their profiles every year. What an incredible opportunity to show off your company as a great place to work. Now, Oricon not only do this when someone looks at their profile, but they also do it when they engage with them on their careers page. Now, Oricon were recognized recently as having one of the top 10 global careers pages on LinkedIn.com. It's an incredible place. You can go on there and engage with Oricon about what it's like to work there with rich media and content targeted at you. Now, the other way that Oricon engages with our LinkedIn members, they have 21,000, actually it's closer to 22,000, Danielle, I think. 22,000 followers. Of course, this is real-time information, so a little bit out. 22,000 followers. How does Oricon use that? That's 22,000 followers that are engaged with information about Oricon as a place to work. They're engaged with Oricon because they're getting targeted status updates. I know when I follow companies in my feed, I get incredibly targeted information coming through to me about what it's like to work at these other places. So Oricon's engaging with these members. So we'd show this story to companies. They'd understand that they've got 130,000 members interested in them, or 130,000 members that are know about Oricon, and 22,000 members who follow Oricon and are engaged with them. But what does that all mean? How does that compare to other companies, and how do we use that information? We wanted a really simple way to tie it all together. That's how Talent Brand Index came about. So Talent Brand Index has two elements. First of all, your reach, the reach of your talent brand, which is essentially how many members on LinkedIn are familiar with you as an employer. And that's important. The second element we'll quickly go through is talent brand engagement. The number of members on LinkedIn that are interested in you as an employer, as a place to work. And that's important. Let me illustrate. I'm a Queenslander, I'll admit it. And I love beer. It's natural, it's what happens up there. And I've also recently moved to Sydney to work at LinkedIn. And I get pretty excited when I walk into a pub down here and see 4X on tap. I mean, who doesn't, right? So I am really familiar. I'm engaged with a lot of beer brands as a consumer, and that's fine. But I have no idea what it's like to work there as a place to work. All right. On the other hand, I've got a number of mates who work at some of Australia's largest law firms, pretty successful lawyers, and they tell me the pay is pretty good. They also start to whinge to me about the long hours, the working into the AMs, and unrealistic expectations. So they let me know that the catered dinner every night isn't exactly complimentary. But I'm familiar with what it's like as a place to work. So that's important. That's the distinction here. So what we did, we actually went away and we asked our members about potential employers. Are you familiar with them? Are you engaged with them? Would you be interested about talking to them about a job opportunity? We then took this information, we then took the members who were familiar about these companies, and we measured their activity on LinkedIn. So we know that members who are familiar with you as a company, as a place to work, are viewing your employees' profiles, like we saw with Oricon, and connecting with your employees. I mean, it makes sense. These people know people at your company, they're looking at their profiles, they know what it's like to work at Oricon or at your company. On the other hand, talent that is interested in you, members who are engaged with you as an employer, are researching your company, looking at your careers page, they're following your company, they're viewing your jobs, and they're applying for your jobs. So what does this mean for Oricon? Let's have a look. So 263,000 members are viewing their employee profiles and connecting with their employees. 64,000 members are interested in them as an employer. These are really interesting numbers. But when we tie it all together, we can calculate the one number that we think really matters, which is the Talent Brand Index. For Oricon, that's 25%. So that's 25% of the members that know about Oricon, who are aware of Oricon as an employer, are engaged with them. Now, because this is based on LinkedIn data, again, breadth and depth, we can measure this in real time. So we can compare it to your competitors. And compare it to your competitors. And again, as Danielle was proudly stating earlier, she's ahead of all of her competitors, which means that the way we measure this, we can say that they're an employer of choice. Peers here, anonymized, of course. We can look at this at a really granular level as well. This is where it becomes really important. We can show companies, Oricon, all of you here, exactly how hard or efficient it's going to be to recruit in different markets. In this example, geographies. So we can look at your talent brand and make some assumptions around whether or not there are weak spots or strengths evident in your talent brand. And because this is real-time data, we can look at it over time. We can look at the ROI aspect. We can look at the uplift from different campaigns or product launches. Now, importantly, you'll notice on this graph, it started to lift about September, which is when I started. So I'll take credit there. Thanks, Danielle. So we can use data, we can use LinkedIn data to prioritize by, first of all, identifying engaged candidates. We can use it to benchmark against peers, get that all-important context. What does that 25% mean? And then we can use it also to diagnose strengths and weaknesses. We can deep dive into your talent brand and have a look at where you might be doing really well, where you might not be doing so well. So I'm going to hand back to Will, who's going to take you through how to put this all into practice. Cheers.
Thanks, Josh. So now just a couple quick tips about how to operationalize this. And again, I think that because data can be, it's quantitative, it can be somewhat scary to people, I think one thing I want to emphasize is that there's simple, actionable ways to start using data, and keeping it simple is the first step. So for example, taking it back to the concepts that Josh brought up, it's about asking the question, what's the size of the talent pool? How large is it? Is it a purple squirrel or a pack of squirrels? The larger the talent pool, the easier it's going to be to fill that rec. How well are you engaging talent? How strong is your talent brand index in that geography or in that function? Do people look like the grumpy software engineer from the 70s, or the guy in the bow tie and suspenders? The higher talent brand index, the better you're engaging talent, the easier it's going to be. Next, workflow. Do you need to completely change your workflow, create an entirely new one? If you really think you're there, you can, but you don't need to. You can use it and improve incrementally on your existing workflow. For example, if you're a recruiter, when you're hiring for a rec, just look at the data. How large is it? How long is this going to take me? How well are we engaging talent in that area? If you're a talent acquisition leader, challenge your team. Ask the right questions. How big is the talent pool? How many candidates are we engaging? And finally, I wanted to share something about how we're doing this at LinkedIn, which we found to be a best practice in our talent acquisition organization. We've actually hired operations and analytics professionals and embedded them within our talent acquisition function. Rather than having an outside group do it, we've had them become subject matter experts within this area, so they can measure, manage, iterate, and repeat. For those organizations that think they're really leading edge here, we've found this to be very successful for our team. So just 3 quick tips. Start using data, keep it simple. Integrate and enhance your existing workflow. You don't need to throw it out. And then finally, create the right team structure to make sure you can be successful. So to summarize, you should hopefully know how to use data to plan by looking at talent pool analysis. The reports are sitting about back. Prioritize engaged talent and measure your talent brand. And finally, put it all into practice. Now, in closing, I wanted to talk a little bit about the future. And so endorsements, as Hari mentioned earlier, is a new feature we rolled out about 6 months ago that I think is going to be a real game changer. This is Shane, who's the most endorsed person at this conference. And by looking at Shane's skills and where he's most endorsed, you can get a sense of what he would look like as a potential candidate. So Shane's most endorsed skill is recruiting. Makes sense, right? He's here today. But then you look down the list: human resources, graduate recruitment, I'm going to bet that Shane specialized in graduate recruiting at some force. Workforce planning. Seems like he has some other HR, more generalist-related skills also. So by looking at where endorsements, which skills stack up on the profile, and where you're more endorsed and less endorsed, you can get a sense from candidates. And more broadly, you can expand it to organizations. So let's take LinkedIn and a skill that's obviously near and dear to my heart, data analysis. All of these people individually at LinkedIn are endorsed for data analysis. But what's really interesting is then when we ask the question, is that good? So how does that do compared to our peers? Are we more or less endorsed in data analysis compared to the other companies that we compete with for talent? And then within LinkedIn, thinking about internal mobility, where are we stronger and where are we weaker by geography or by function? Again, it was only rolled out 6 months ago, but we're already seeing a ton of traction, and we think this is going to be really big in the future. However, in closing, I want to bring it back to the phrase that I mentioned at the beginning. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Well, we think that now, in 2013, LinkedIn can help you measure it and manage it. So thank you very much for your time, everybody.